want to show you guys a really simple way to take any scale and turn it into something actually musical. Most people, when they practice scales, they just kind of learn all the positions up and down the neck. They go up and down, maybe they put on a metronome and practice to that, and then they start soloing and they're just kind of going up and down the scale, but they're not really making any strong phrases with that, and it's not really what they want to hear. You're not alone. I was one of those people, but there's a really simple way to practice scales in a way that sounds musical right off the bat. And it really comes down to three main things: patterns, rhythm, and resolution. So let's start nice and simple. Let's take E minor pentatonic. And let's say I'm in this position here. This E minor chord up here on the 7th fret. First I'm going to locate my minor pentatonic scale position. So we have... So I could put on a backing track and just kind of go up and down the scale and hope something cool happens. Pretty boring, right? No flavor, no resolution, just kind of going up and down aimlessly. So instead of just going straight up and down, let's try to play the scale in a pattern. There are endless possibilities for patterns and you can come up with your own patterns. But let's say I do this one here. So instead of just going straight up, I'm doing this skip back sort of thing, where I'm hitting my first note here, then I'm skipping the next note in the pentatonic scale and going to this one instead. So I'm going straight from here to here. Then I'm going to come back to the note that I skipped, right? Then I'm going to do the same thing starting from here. So I'm going to skip the note right next to it. I'm going to skip this one. I'm going to jump up to here. And from there I'm going to come back to the note I skipped. And you can continue up that way. Coming down, you can do the opposite. You can start on the high note, skip this one, and go straight to here, then go back to the note you skipped. So now let's try that over the backing track. So it's getting a little more interesting, but still there's kind of a lack of a resolution point. I'm just kind of climbing up and down the scale here. So I want to skip ahead to resolution because it's important that we have a place that we're leading towards with our phrases. You can play the coolest thing in the world, but if you don't resolve it right, it's not really going to sound that good. So what are my important resolution notes in E minor? Well, if you follow me on this channel, you know I can't stop talking about chord tones. Chord tones are the notes that are already inside the chord. So it makes sense that those notes would sound really good over that chord. So if we're thinking E minor, within an E minor chord you have an E, a G, and a B. But I like to think of it in numbers. I like to think of it as the root, the flat 3, and the 5. That just means the first note in the scale, the third note in the scale, and the fifth note in the scale. In this case, the third note is a flat 3 because we're thinking E natural minor scale. If it was an E major scale, then it would just be a regular 3, not a flat 3. So if I resolve my phrases on any of those notes, it's going to sound pretty good because it's going to be like I'm sticking the landing on a note that's in the chord. So to our ears, that's going to sound right, or it's going to sound like it makes sense. Whereas if we're sticking the landing on a note that's not inside the chord, it can still be cool, but sometimes it's harder to make that situation sound good right off the bat. Whereas this is like a proven easy way to just be like, bam, hitting the chord tone confidently over an E minor. It gives your phrase kind of this strength and this confidence. So in order to do this really well, obviously you have to know where your chord tones are. And if I go through all that in this video, it's probably going to be too much. But a little trick is that you can just look at a chord that you know in that area, an E minor chord. And all those notes are chord tones because they're inside the chord, right? So you could just use that as a frame of reference and be like, if I land my phrases on one of these notes, it should sound pretty good. Beyond that, you can find your triad, your arpeggio, and any other chord voicings you may know in the area. But let's say all I know is this. I'm going to try to land confidently on one of those notes in this chord on the downbeat, meaning if we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, bam, I want to stick that landing on the downbeat confidently. So let's see what that sounds like. We're playing this scale pattern. And then we have to land on one of these notes to really sell the idea. If I do that out of time first, I know I can stick the landing there because that note is right in the chord right there, but let's say I end up somewhere in the middle. What did I just do there? Well, I was going up the scale pattern. When I got here, I was like, hold on, I have a root right here. I have a 1 right here, meaning my E. That's a great note to land on. It's the root. It's like our home base. It's our E, and we're playing E minor. But in order to stick the landing on that in a way that sounded good with the phrase, I didn't want to just jump there because it was kind of on the offbeat of the phrase. And I may lose some of you here, and I'm totally aware of that. Obviously, everyone who's watching this video is in a slightly different spot. So just bear with me, keep watching. This stuff will definitely help. Just watch it back over and over again if something's confusing. So I was feeling the phrase like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I wanted to land on 7, I guess, beat 7. But what happened was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I land there then I can't land on that note on the downbeat, beat 7. So what I did instead of just following the rest of the pattern, I kind of branched out from the pattern at that point and went around the note that I wanted to hit, around that root, and stuck the landing on it. So I kind of surrounded it. So you can take like a piece of the scale pattern and then branch out at some point to surround your target note or to lead more smoothly into your target note. So let's do another like random example here. All right, something like that. So what just happened? I went down the scale pattern. Now here, instead of just continuing down and then being like, okay, well now where do I resolve? I just hit my root. It's kind of anticlimactic to just hit that root again. Instead of that, I started breaking away from the scale pattern a little early to then resolve me on my root inevitably. So really I kind of took this little phrase, which are just other notes from the pentatonic scale, just in a different order, right? To get me on the root. So it's a good framework. Targeting the root is a pretty solid way to go about this at first, especially for minor chords. Right? As opposed to... it's not that great. So I'm going to put the loop back on and improvise with this specific scale pattern again, just now resolving on either the root, the flat 3, or the 5th. So one of those chord tones. So let's see what happens. So it's getting a little better. It's getting a little more intentional, and it sounds less just like I'm going up and down the scale. It still definitely has that quality though, because for the majority of the time, I'm just really playing the scale pattern. But when you're practicing, that's actually not necessarily a bad thing, because what we actually want to do when we learn a new scale pattern is figure out, okay, what does this sound like when we bring this into the context of improvising? Are these ideas that I like? Are these ideas that I don't like? How can I make them sound more musical? And forcing it out like this in your playing, like going through this method, is going to bridge that gap between what you do when you practice and what actually comes out when you play. For most people, there's this big gap between the two. It's like you practice all these scales and maybe you learn all these new things, but it just doesn't come out when you play. And also for a lot of people, they just practice like noodling and going up and down the scale, and then that's what happens when they improvise. So this is a way to kind of like bridge the gap between the two. So the last thing we're going to implement here today is rhythm. So far I've been doing a lot of eighth notes, just da 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 da. But we don't have to do just eighth notes, right? We could do triplets, we could displace the rhythms, we could leave more space between notes. So let's mess around with that a little bit and see what that sounds like. it's definitely coming together. The next step from there is you'd want to apply this in different positions, different keys. And then you can do it over actual chord progressions, where the chord tones that you're targeting depend on the chord that's happening at that very moment. That gets a little trickier. If you feel stuck with your improvising, kind of playing the same things over and over again, I help a lot of guitarists in that situation break free of their habits, really open up the fretboard and play a whole lot more freely. If that sounds interesting to you, I'm leaving a link below to book a call with me where I can get to know you as a guitar player a little more and see how I can help you out. In any case, hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.